Well, I don't know whether we should have this discussion or we should just have fun. So yeah, I mean the purpose was to sit down here and talk about what is the kind of disruptions which we have gone through in supply chain in the last few years. Is it time to change the models of supply chain practices globally? Is it time to change from inventory to drive demand-driven models? There are a lot of questions which have arisen in the last few years, and I thought we'll all sit down and explore and share our experiences in how we can do it. Is supply chain transformation also a key important part of digital transformation, so-called digital transformation, which every brand is going through? So that was the idea. We have these wonderful people with us. Thank you very much. Some of them have not joined us. Maybe it's late. So let me quickly turn towards three of you. And Vikram, to start with, that you have had multi-brand experience. Hi, Tirthankar, come join us. Yeah. So, the Bikram, let me start with you because you have the experience of multi-brand retail in the past, especially your recent experience with Reliance, where you had multiple categories. What is the and that was the time when you were with the disruption time. What was your experience? What kind of disruptions you noticed? And then maybe I'll come to Ranjan because he's a supply chain expert. He will have more better view on what has happened.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the last maybe 3 to 4 years. Yeah, quite obviously we've had the pandemic, right? And at that time, online offline business was pretty much running, in a certain cruise control mode. Okay, there was no major disruption, no dramatic changes happening. But of course, with the pandemic came massive amount of disruption. Businesses had to re-evolve themselves, particularly the food business. Okay, so being at Reliance at that time, from a food perspective, we had to build. Actually, we didn't have a very robust food online platform at that point. During the pandemic, we built GeoMart, right just about the time when the pandemic hit, and we had the whole shutdowns. That's when we built GeoMart really quick. That enabled a lot of online business, and that enabled us to then start serving our customers through the online channel. So I think pandemic was a big disruption which transitioned people a lot from the physical to the online space. I'll add a couple more points to that. So pandemic, if you look at a global level, yeah, China had a zero COVID policy. Okay, the Russia-Ukraine war started. Right, what has that happened? What has that caused for supply chains? A lot of businesses depended on China. Everyone had to now start to reevaluate, and I'm sure Shailesh here and other folks who dealt with China will be able to share that dependency on one particular country or one particular region became a problem. Russia, we had issues with, ocean freight and all of that stuff. Those costs got transferred back to retailers here. So I think essentially these factors have caused supply chains to rethink uh, where they need to get their source of the product from, right? And or have some level of resiliency that you can shift. And I think our colleagues will be able to share a little more about that. I can talk more on the tech front.
Yeah, so I think it will be interesting to know from the front end of the business, which is store and customers facing, what are the kind of disruptions we faced, Yeah, he's
So thank you. So basically, Vikram spoke about COVID related issues, and when COVID happened, demand suddenly disappeared, and most of the retailers were sitting on maybe 3 to 4 months inventory and orders in pipeline for 6 to 8 months forward looking. The biggest challenge was, since there is no demand, what are you going to do with that inventory in pipeline?
But that is for non-essential.
Yes.
But on essential, it was the other way around.
Sure. But primarily because we operate in the fashion space, the biggest challenge which we faced was how are you going to deal with a inventory on hand and b this purchase orders in line without necessarily impacting the vendor ecosystem. uh, I guess most of us did well. Also vendor realized that it is a short time gap while it happened 3 years in a row, but every time we learned. I think with covid, what covid allowed us to do is to necessarily flex our muscles, and we just got stronger. Not we as individual retailer, but I think the entire ecosystem, retailer, storefront, or vendor base, all of us just got much more stronger. I think we are reacting to the demand changes much better than what we would have otherwise responded to.
That's interesting. We'll learn more about that, Ranjan.
Yeah, I think one of the one of the big change which came with COVID is about like Shailesh said, a lot of inventory, leftover inventory, and a lot of the inventory in the pipeline, which is supposed to come to you. But I'll leave the COVID piece there. But then even if you leave that, in the subsequent years as well, the problem did not completely go away because the whole supply chain, the whole value chain had shifted big time. Because suddenly there was a jerk. There was no manpower available from a production perspective, from a manufacturing perspective in the factories. There were no orders. Orders were getting cancelled or they were getting delayed because obviously you couldn't pick if you have 3-4 months of inventory lying with you. You will want to push that order a little bit and say, how can we survive or sustain this kind of a shock that had come with COVID? But I think what made us all stronger is whoever survived this, they become more stronger actually, because this helped us to relook at our processes which were running for ages, relook at our supply chain. Insourcing became a game, or a near sourcing became a game of things, because you could not be dependent upon, like Vikram rightly said, China or any other player from a perspective of having a long lead time for your deliveries or for your manufacturing process itself, because the whole supply chain process had to be cut down, because it was also something that we had to build as a process was how could we manage these shocks better, which means that earlier prior to COVID we were placing orders almost 6 months ahead. What changed with that is suddenly we figured out how to reduce that cycle from 6 months to maybe 3 months or even less than that. How not to buy 100% of your season buy well in advance, because then you are overcommitting and you really don't know what is going to change. Like even after the COVID, when things started opening up, there was a huge demand for top wear and athleisure. Nobody had planned for athleisure. Athleisure was not that big as the category, but since people were staying at home, they were using a lot of athleisure. A lot of t-shirts and shirts came into demand, a lot of top wears came into demand, but the bottoms wear were just not selling. The biggest contributor from a fashion perspective, if you look at from a men's fashion, is denim. That's the biggest value that brings in. From a women's wear, it was dresses that would bring in from a Western wear. None of them were selling. Nobody needed them. So we had to tweak your category mix to that. Now the big problem was the data that you gathered during that period was not relevant at all, because it was supposed to subside. Suddenly you had seen a huge spike in e-commerce. E-commerce demand was going through the roof because that was the only channel that was available, because most of the stores were closed. And you also had to factor in how is that going to get normalized, because e-commerce normalization was very, very clear that it has to happen, but you really did not know the base. Where is it going to subside to, and what is the mix between an offline and an online is going to change towards. Then came the big push from an omni-channel that we were talking about from a customer side. I'll touch that point as well. That we had always been talking about. That push came big way because a lot of inventory was lying in the stores. That was a natural progression, and what was just a fad in terms of omni-channel became a reality during COVID and post that. And now you talk of every retailer, most of the retailers will be running omni-channel, and very, very smoothly, very, very well. That's become almost kind of a well-geared machinery. So the big shift is also, and it's not ended till now. If you look at the shift in terms of the consumption pattern itself is completely shifting, which you are not able to predict. So the only thing that retailers, or at least we as retailers, are trying to sustain this with is, how do we reduce the supply chain lead time? How do we cut that lead time to maybe even, we've introduced a very, very classical thing, which we called Ultra Express. So earlier, before COVID, we used to have Express. Now we are saying we want to do Ultra Express. The meaning of Express used to be about 45 to 60 days is when, from a conceptualization to the product on the shop floor. Now we're saying we need Ultra Express, where we need that much of a breather for us to not overcommit ahead of time and also react to the changing trends. Certainly one trend that we realized in the last season was there was a huge shift in women's wear from a top category to a shirt category. We had never planned for it. And if you don't create these buffers, or if you don't create these processes or optimize your supply chains to be able to gear up and meet these demands, have the manufacturing capacity, have the fabric so that you can quickly turn around, that's where the whole game is shifting from a supply chain perspective, from a fashion per se.
So Shailesh, let me come back to you. You have been, doing, what do you call it, bridging the gap between what is the demand and what is the planned merchandise. What do you think? What are the reasons behind these gaps of real demand and what you plan as a merchandiser when you order your merchandise or your range?
I guess that's a very classical question. When you do your budgets, you typically end up doing, most of us work in April to March kind of a financial year. You end up doing your budget sometime in November, December, taking a guess on what is going to happen in spring, summer. But when you actually start trading, you realize that what your plan before 3 months in advance, it's not really how the season is landing. And this problem has been there, I think, in retail for many years. It's not new. What happened during COVID is that, as Ranjan was speaking, we started reducing the lead time. Not only the lead time from DC to stores or warehouses to stores, but also the lead time from vendors to the DC. And as I said in the earlier comment, it's very, very important that COVID happened, and it helped us to maybe develop the muscle to flex the lead time better. But this gap, sir, will always remain. I'm very sure. Even if I do this for next 20 years, it's not going to go.
No, I think that's a core of the problem, and we'll come to that. Bikram, most of the retail brands have been using so-called forecasting and planning system for ages. What do you think is wrong with them?
I think forecasting is a little bit overrated. Okay. I think the whole point is you got to be getting feedback from the customer there and then, collecting it, accumulating it, and then acting on it, right? Forecasting looks at your historic numbers,
Correct.
all of
So
that
it's a
stuff.
time series model.
Yeah, I think where the whole world is moving into is more real time collecting data and being able to act on it. So I don't think that we should be forecasting now for a year, 6 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
It is more real time. And as Shailesh and Ranjan have been talking about, how do I shorten the lead times of my supply chain to be able to react to those real time signals? So I can talk about Landmark. One of the things which we do very well is our NPS and being able to react to that. We have a very, very strong NPS review process, and that then enables us to react to it and in various aspects. So it could be category, it could be service, it could be speed of delivery, it could be anything. But you need a very strong, as we've talked about in the past, demand sensing. So that's something that one needs to have the ears on the ground.
Yeah. So now you mentioned about reducing the lead time. That is only reducing the inventory risk to some extent, but it is not reducing the gap between the demand and the supply. I mean, what customer wants and what is available in the store, that gap is not disappearing. And this is where when I want to come to Ranjan now.
It enables you to react faster. That's
Yeah.
the only thing.
No, Ranjan, I want to, we were talking about this gap between demand and the supply and the availability. Do you think there are some external factors associated with it which are missing in the whole process of planning and forecasting?
Yeah, I think one of the large piece that Vikram also touched upon was most of our forecasting models are based on our own data, which is a past data. It's a time series model that we run mostly from a forecasting perspective. I think one of the classic cases that we are trying to adopt or we've tried to bring in was, and then to cope with that, I'll still stick to the forecasting model that we all run. And one of the challenge with that is the accuracy of the information, the accuracy of the master data. So the sales and the inventory count will always be right. But where the challenge starts cropping up is the master data. How clean is our master data? And that's where the whole game is shifting, because if your master data, and we've all struggled, we are all at different stages of having a clean data basis which you can forecast it right, because in a fashion space, it's not about just replenishment, it is also a lot about replacement. And when you have to replace, you will have to understand, you'll have to figure out what kind of attributes, what kind of product categories do you need to bring in to replace what? What are the similar product categories which are selling that you should replace, because you cannot have a same product running for years, especially in a fast fashion space. Or for that matter, even in a fashion space, yes, there will be some core which will be running for a few months, maybe a couple of years as well, but then most of the product has to keep innovating and coming up new. So I think a huge sense or the forecasting models have to start incorporating external data which could be coming from anywhere. And it could be coming from other markets, could be Europe, US markets as well, because we are slightly behind trend from a fashion perspective in India. We catch up to a great extent, but then be able to sense that, localize that, adjust that to your DNA, your brand DNA, because you just can't make everything and anything. What works in Paris will not work here. So you'll have to adjust that to your brand's DNA. You'll have to adjust to the colors. You'll have to adjust to the fabrics that you're going to use here. Maybe even the silhouettes, because the same silhouette might still not work. And adjust that, do that fine tuning, and that's where I think technology is a great tool with the whole bunch of AI ML stuff that we are doing and we are leveraging in this space. That's a huge enabler for the people who are running the whole process of being able to design, being able to spot trend, be able to convert that trend into the products that we are making. Leaving aside, I still feel the forecasting model has to become much more shorter, and it has to be a rolling plan that has to continuously keep running, where you are able to accommodate maybe not the overall number, but you are able to accommodate the category shift, the merchandise mix shift, the size shift. That's where the size shift is also happening. That's also something that you have to be wary of in terms of how are you readjusting that, or at a very close time, much closer to the season, much closer to the time when you are actually supposed to launch that product on the shop floor. So bringing that external data and then adding it to your internal data and then overlaying into your internal data and then making sense out of that whole thing, being able to forecast basis, that's going to be the key.
I was talking about external data from the point of view of each store, like Vikram mentioned, a point of demand sensing. Every store has got its own catchment, its own environment, its own way of selling, its own demographic around it, which influences the sale, and its own patterns in many ways. So there is no way to capture that data because it's at a store level to real sense the real-time demand. Now, before we come to the demand sensing point, Shailesh, I want to ask one question from you. Do you think, in my view, I think one of the gap lies in that when the merchandise comes in, we do allocation to the stores. Once allocation is done, the replenishment is not done by using the store data. It's done by some standard routine planner method. Do you think, is that the right way, right practice? Because in my view, I think there is one gap, that's where you land up having unsold inventory in the store after the end of life of the range. and then you land into markdown situation, you know. Is that a correct assumption?
So Ajay, you are right to an extent, because traditionally, if you look at people, will replenish to the base stocks, and there is an inherent discrepancy in the base stock led model because you are assuming that you will sell X. Most of the retailers now, if you talk to, they are moving to pull based system. Uh, Theory of constraint is something which most of us now talk about. If we are not implementing theory of constraints, we may be picking up some essence of theory of constraint and trying to implement that. We moved to pull based system many years ago. Having said that, pull based system also has a flaw from the perspective of just because you sold one, you are replenishing another one. It does not have guarantee that you will sell there. And that's where I think tech can play a very significant role. We're trying. Unfortunately, till now, we're not necessarily able to find an answer. But I'm very sure, knowing, see, the knowledge resides with the merchant, in this case, a merchandiser or a buyer, right? Unfortunately, we've been forcing them to follow a process or a system, which does not necessarily allow us to, capitalize on the knowledge which the person who's running the brand has. But using the knowledge, we can create a system which can enable this replenishment model, which can be little bit better than a pull based system. So base stock to pull base to real pull base, whether it will sell or not, I guess that is where the systems will move in future, is my understanding.
So before we come to Tirthankar, Vikram, just tell us more about your demand sensing approach which you were talking about.
So demand sensing approach is a mix of sales at the cash till, for example, okay, being able to capture one of, that's one parameter that you want to capture. Ranjan talked about outside parameters, which is, it could be the environment, the region, the time of the year, various other parameters. So it's a mix of capturing the sale at that moment, what is happening in the environment around you. It could be weather, it could be anything, but essentially understanding what is happening over there and then being able to predict based on that, but not forecasting for long periods of time. So I'm talking about demand sensing, which is a very short-term decision making. And it's more about, it's not leading you to manufacture more, it's leading you to say, I need to fulfill from my DC to my store. I need to quickly replenish, essentially. So that's the demand sensing I'm talking about, not about manufacturing a new line or something of that.
So Tirthankar, I am bringing you very late into discussion, and the reason because I think you from the RFID space, and I wanted to now coming to demand sensing, what is the role of RFID, especially in lifestyle and demand sensing? And I've just come across some use cases recently, which I will talk. Let me hear you out first.
Excuse me. Thank you. I think generally it's the visibility that the technology gives you, which will help in demand sensing, right? That's the core of it, because now the fashion is changing so quickly. You need to make sure that the right things are at the right store at the right time, right? And visibility is one of the key areas. And a lot of our panelists here have spoken about supply chain from a very retail centric view. Since I'm from outside retail in general, I think what's going to transform supply chain in India, especially in the long run, are two factors. One is automation, and the second is infrastructure. Without these two, the effect that the retail industry wants with respect to the speed and the efficiency that they're looking for is not going to happen, right? So overall, when we as an organization look at supply chain, for us is to enable the digital trigger to enhance the visibility in the ecosystem. Once we achieve that, then I think there are a lot of 3PL players and the big boys who are very recently, starting to focus on India because of the large market, and also the fact that if you see the supply chain in India, it's very concentrated on the metro major cities. Still, the supply chain is very lacking and not developed when it comes to far-flung, tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think that's where the challenge is. Metros, there's not much of a challenge for these brands. And we believe that with the induction of automation and the infrastructure, we can reach that level of penetration that the retailers can benefit from. And very recently, UPS has just opened up a technology center in Chennai that invested about $10 million. And I think we're going to see a transformation in supply chain in India in the right direction. And that will come with a change in infrastructure as well.
You know, I work with startups, and one of the startup I work with is doing work on RFID solutions. And he reached out to me just few weeks ago, very excitedly, and he said, "I've got an idea in mind that in a fashion store, a lot of customers take X number of garments in the trial room, and they come out, and they buy only one or two out of that, not all. What if I make a solution which will keep track of this, what is taken inside the trial room, and out of that, what was bought and what was not bought? And if that data can be used for, again, for replenishment, for stock replenishment in the store, or for inventory planning in the store, or from the customer marketing engagement point of view, do you think that is a good idea?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a great idea. What do you think about that?"
Absolutely. In fact, we are already doing it. We are doing this with a few major sports brands where they actually monitor the assets going into the change room area, and then they see what's been checked out and what's not checked out. So I cannot say much about it, but it's already there. It is something which is related to data analytics and the fact that what is fast moving, the color combinations that are being taken into the storeroom and things like that. So it's already done. It will take a while for it to come to India, but I think that's one of the benefits of deploying this technology, right? Data is quite.
I'm going to be a little contrarian on this one. that I think to be able to try to estimate what's going into a changing room and what's being checked out, and find a relationship between the two is going to be quite a challenge. But I don't think that there's a direct linkage, and it's going to be extremely difficult to find the linkage between the two. Also, you don't know what the customer. You have to know more about why the customer has said no to a certain product. It could be a design, it could be fit, of course, an easy one, and size may be an
The
easy
very
one.
fact they picked it up from the shelf, that means they liked it in the first place.
Not necessarily. So you have to understand why. Then why did they reject it? So I'm saying that you can make it work, but you have to add more parameters, more value to it to be able to take a decision.
So I think I agree with what Vikram said and what Tirthankar said, both of them, and because I'm sitting in the center, and I think both of them are right in a way. But where this is going to start helping a retailer or a product guy is to get a sense of from a replenishment and all of that. Yes, fair. If you have RFID at a store, then you will obviously you're able to enable replenishments at two levels. One is from the back store to the shop floor, and then from the DC to the back store as well. So both the cycles gets there's humongous transparency and accuracy in the data for which you can leverage to be able to do this. But from a trial room efficiency, I think it starts adding a lot of value in terms of saying, and I agree to you, Ajay, saying when you say that when a customer picked it up from the shelf, obviously they like the product. That's the reason why in the first place they're taking it to the trial room. There are two factors that can happen. The customer would have picked up 6 pieces, but they only wanted to buy 2 or 1, and hence they left 5 of them. But what is also a sense that you start getting from that data is the fits. Maybe the customer did not like those specific fits, because why does a customer buy? If the product is going to look good on them, the price decision has been made if they picked it up for trial. The color decision has been made. The style decision has been made. So there are only 2 things that can go wrong. If it is not going to look good on that particular person, from that color might not look good on that particular person, or that size fit is, or that size or that fit is not right for that customer. And at least that amount of sense you can start making from that data in terms of saying, what do you do with this? Why is this particular style, this particular, because and this is far more relevant in a women's wear than a men's wear, I'll tell you. Because men's wear largely, most of us, we know our sizes, and we walk into a store and we'll say, agar slim fit shirt chahiye, to this is the size I want. If it's a regular fit shirt, then I need this size. Most of us do that. But in a women's wear, with the silhouette and the fabric, the fit keeps changing. And that's a knowledge that if you can start bringing it back to the product guy, to the merchandising guy, that's an input that they can start leveraging in terms of their future designs and the future fits, which will start immensely helping them. So it definitely adds a value there in terms of which one has been taken to the trial room but has not been sold.
Now my question is to three of you, Tirthankar, Vikram and Ranjan. Every retail brand is today talking about digital transformation. A lot of digital transformation projects are going on. How much of that is a supply chain transformation component?
So I'd say on the supply chain, see, taking Tirthankar's previous point about automation, okay, as an area which a lot of retailers are taking up, right? That's part of transformation. So I think automation earlier used to be a very expensive affair, okay, and hence there were this very select few retailers who had money to be able to invest in automation. The good thing is that now there are, one, price has come down, and two, I guess it's a lot more modular. And I know, I think even Shailesh will be able to share how we incrementally did a very step approach even at Westside years back for the large scale DC. So, you take a stepped approach. So I think everyone's going to at some point move to automation once volumes pick up for the retailers that are actually doing decent volumes. The other thing is RFID. I think Tirthankar is right in the heart of it. But RFID sensors are areas where a lot of them will pick it up. And RFID can be as expensive affair as you want it to be, or as less expensive as you want it to be. So you selectively deploy it where it makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of expensiveness or cost, but it's a question of importance in how much supply chain is important in the overall digital transformation. And of course,
maybe it's more return on investment, I think. Not necessarily expensive, but more return, because a lot of it's capital intensive. So you have to have money to put in to begin with. And how many brands can actually
so do you see this as an opportunity for you to grow your...
I mean, the opportunity is definitely there. The moment you say digital, that means there is identification, right? And when there is identification, there's a trigger, be it a barcode, be it a QR code, or be it a RFID tag. The thing is, a lot of people are talking about digital transformation because it benefits every aspect of your business, be it supply chain, be it marketing, or be it back-end, stuff. So the moment you go digital, that means there's a technology which gives a unique identification. So the moment that comes in, our technology comes in. So it is the right thing which is happening, and it's going to benefit the entire ecosystem in the long run. As I said, in India, there are challenges because of the costing. A lot of people still think that it's an expensive technology. You may not get your ROI depending on the size of the project. But that is slowly changing. We are seeing major brands in India adopt this and going the correct way by implementing it from a step-by-step manner. And definitely within 2 to 3 years, they would see the actual impact of what this technology can do for their brand and for the sales and the customer experience, right? So those are the key factors that this is. And the good part is that it's a well-known brand in India with a very good reputation. So when they actually go full out on this, then probably the ecosystem will understand the actual benefit. Yeah.
I think from a digital transformation perspective, if you look at, and especially post-COVID, there's been a lot of emphasis on supply chain. A lot of our other processes still had some technology intervention or the other. Supply chain had largely been a neglected one, where what we used to have normally was a large distribution center with a WMS, and that's all. You did not have any technology intervention beyond that. Then we started bringing in some amount of automation in terms of some put-to-lights, some sortation systems, other sortation systems, some conveyors, some mechanization is what we did. But I think digital transformation does not stop there. The whole scope of digital transformation in supply chain will start right from the demand planning, the SNOP planning, And it goes down to the operations of not just digitizing your DC, but how do you digitize the backward supply chain as well? Because you do not have enough visibility at your vendor's location in terms of where, at what stage of the manufacturing process they are at, you might not be able to react and take decisions, especially with the volatile uh, demand that's there today. And that's, if you have to readjust that, you need to have bridge that gap in terms of digitizing that process as well. This will not just be done by large tools. There are enough smaller tools, smaller pieces that we need to bring in. And there are a lot of automations. It's not just hardware automations. It is not just mechanization. There are software automation bots that can be used to be optimize a process. A simple example I'll give you. One of the things that we used to struggle with is we do a lot of shipments we send to partner stores. And in case of a partner store, we have a purchase requisition that we raise. We send it to the partner store or shop partner. They convert that into a PO, and then we basis that we ship out. Now they could possibly change from whatever purchase requisition we have raised, in spite of we being on an SOR model. How do you compare at a line item level from the PO to the sales order to whatever invoice you have generated, and how do you ensure that everything is matching, right from the price to the quantity to everything? Humanly, it was not possible. That's a small intervention. How can you solve this? These are all disintegrated processes and systems. These are all maybe because the PO is coming on a mail, and then you have the other pieces on your system. That's a small automation bot that you can place there, which can actually do that job and give you a very, and that itself could improve or reduce your leakages, because the supply chain leakages have been humongous in nature. And we've never realized the fact how those leakages happen, because we did not have the know-how or the tools to be able to control them earlier. Because we were trying to solve that problem by putting more manpower. That's not the answer to it. Digitization of the process, automation of those processes are the only answers to this, because the amount of data that we handle in a WMS, the amount of data that we go through in terms of the overall supply chain, you will need tools to be able to manage all of that seamlessly, so that there is a person who is only taking decisions for exceptions rather than running and managing everything. It's only then we will be able to bring in the speed, because I gave you the situation. From a 6 months lead time from a manufacturing to the store, or from a placement of an order or design to a store, we are trying to bring it down to 20-25 days. How is that going to happen? You have to cut down at every stage. Everything has to become much more mechanical. Everything has to become much more automated. And that's where the automation and digitization starts playing a much larger role.
If I may add,
If
I may add, I completely agree with Ranjan and Vikram both. If you look at the business, you cannot necessarily isolate supply chain as a process. And what we have been working on, and I guess most of us, is to develop something called as digital core. Okay, all your business processes has to fall in a manner where they are getting solved using digitization or automation. Reduction in lead time is reality, need of the hour, and I guess unless we have a very strong process oriented digital system or digital core existing in the business, it's going to be extremely difficult to respond to the customer need as fast as what we are intending to. So I guess as Ranjan said, developing the entire core right from the vendor to customer, I guess that's where I guess the future is heading towards.
Titankar, I want you to give us some case studies of what are the impact RFID has made in some of the businesses from your own experience.
Put me in a. There are, I mean, especially in retail. Let's focus, since we're talking about retail. One of the examples that we use and we are authorized to use is Uniqlo. So Uniqlo as a brand, I won't get into the figures, but they actually saw the actual benefit of deploying RFID, and we actually made, based on their recommendations, a unique tag only for Uniqlo itself. So if you look at the global brands, be it Marks and Spencer, be it Uniqlo, be it Decathlon, be it um, what was that, Lululemon, Lemon, and all these top brands, Adidas, Nike, all of them we supply RFID inlays, and there has to be a reason why they're using it, right? Even since Ranjan is there from Bestseller, they also use RFID. They source it from Europe through our partners. So there is benefit. It's just that in India, it's not fully enabled yet at the store level. But the penetration, just to give you an example, if you look at North America, the penetration level is about 92% of RFID in retail, right? In Europe, it's more 94, 95%. If you look into India, it's about 4%. So that's the growth that we're looking at, you know. So benefits are there, the case studies are there, which we can share with the partners, whoever is interested in. But generally, we don't give out numbers because it's very sensitive for that particular brand, right?
No, no,
But-
I'm not saying brand specific. I'm
Yeah.
just saying use cases. Basically,
Yeah.
the purpose of use cases. What are the kind of benefits it delivers without even naming the brand? Yeah.
I mean, in general, it's the efficiency. Overall, how it simplifies your process and the decision making, and reduction in labor, increase in accuracy, more. For example, Target, they actually improved their on-store inventory with respect to different sizes by deploying RFID technology. For example, a fast-moving item, if there's no medium, they actually did a study and they lost about 4% of the revenue for that particular brand because there was no medium on the floor, right? So they solved that using RFID. The moment anything goes out from there, there's an indication that medium is missing from the shop floor, and it gets put there. So cases like that, but in general, what this technology gives you is visibility right from manufacturing to point of sale. And that gives you a very good example is not recently, 8 months back, there was a dead body which washed up in UK. And luckily he was wearing a Decathlon t-shirt. And they actually scanned the t-shirt because it had a RFID tag. And he was an illegal immigrant, crossed over from Africa, came into France, and he bought that t-shirt from France. And they were able to identify the sort of region where he came from and what. So there are many benefits, and it's there for everybody to see. It's just that in India, it's still something that we need to convince the brands to go for it. But in general, they'll realize once the costing comes down, I think. Yeah.
If I may add, Ajay, because while we have done some initial implementation of RFID, I'm not sharing my own experience in my business, but the experiences outside my business. What RFID does is takes away the friction. If you shop in a Uniqlo store in, say, Delhi, I guess they have the fastest billing. And billing time is one of the most important deterrent for a customer not to shop at you. So that definitely is one. From the supply chain perspective, I won't name the brand, but you'll recognize it when I speak about it. There's a brand in India which operates when you sell the product at the till, the information goes to the back end, and the replenishment from the back end happens to the front end within 1 hour. And somebody can really manage that, not only at the store level, at the central office level. And the brand doesn't carry a lot of warehousing space in India. And they ship from their central warehouse to Bombay in 3 days. So imagine the opportunity to reduce the stock in pipeline using the right technology. RFID, Vikram was with us many years ago, and he was the one who proposed RFID back in 2007. Unfortunately, the tags then used to cost 65 bucks. Now they're at 3.5 rupees, and I think it's becoming real for most of us to use RFID.
Vikram and Ranjan, I want you to give us some examples of supply chain transformation which you have carried out or you have experienced or you heard of, and what are the kind of benefits it has delivered?
Okay, so couple of examples. Okay, one is in pilot. I'll talk about my past experience. Okay, one is in pilot, and one was something we implemented during the pandemic, or just before the pandemic rather, for JioMart. Okay, so I'm talking about Reliance Retail. So for the Geomart B2B business, uh, the volumes, the the kind of scope of the business was going to go across a lot of the kiranas, right? So volumes were going to be extremely high. And the plan to begin with was not to have multiple DCs all across the country, which later became expanded to a larger plan. But there was one warehouse. I won't get into too much details as to where that warehouse is. So there was one warehouse where we needed to ensure scale and speed. And that's where we built actually a lot of automation within that warehouse. Now, it's not just about it's mechanization actually that we built, but there was a lot of thinking behind it. Okay, so when we talked about kirana and talking about food, right? Food has, food has different types of speed of moving products, right? Some of them really move very fast, some are frequent, but not in high volume, some are bulk. So the thinking there was to, of course, categorize them into A, B, and C types of products. For A, we had a certain picking process. That picking process, we started off with a handheld, but then we moved into a voice-based picking. And because we realized that people reacted a lot faster to voice-based, then we expanded into regional voice. Okay, so there was a Hindi kind of thing, just as a language change. So that was one kind of a change. Of course, it wasn't an easy transition. It was a voice-based picking itself was a challenge to implement, and then shifting into another language was another thing. So that was like the A class items. B class were more about pick to light kind of systems, and then put to light for my sortation and outward. So that's one level of automation that we did within the warehouse. Very highly automated warehouse, but good amount of thinking in this, and people then adapting to even the pick to light, for example, getting people to actually manage those bays and be able to pick the right product and put it into the basket that is coming through. A lot of training that goes into that kind of stuff. So that was one. Another one which I said was in pilot is more about AGVs and robots. So again, with Reliance, it's a pilot that we've done in a non-trading warehouse, where we have been evaluating how do we make it completely automated. So you have products that come in from receiving, you put a product onto a conveyor belt, and right from there all the way to put away, it gets picked by a robot, goes up to another conveyor belt, goes to a lift goes up to a carton shuttle puts it into my bins. So that's the kind of automation that we've done. So there's a lot of training that gets involved, and huge amount of technology that goes into it, and pilot testing for accuracy and all of that stuff. These are the couple of things that we've done.
So I think where was in supply chain, the biggest transformations that have happened for us was about just before COVID hit. We were consolidating our 5 distribution centers in West, and we were consolidating them to one. The biggest shift happened is we started that, and we went live with that DC in Feb of 2020, and March is when the shutdown came in. We had to transition everything within about, shut all our distribution centers about in 8 months. Now we had a new target. We had to shut them in spite of having no manpower, and a new WMS. We went live with SAP WMS, and in about 5 months. We achieved that with a lot of hue and cry, a lot of disruption, I would say, but that was the best time because anyway the stores were not operational at its peak. So we could manage that. So the WMS itself is the core at the heart of our distribution center, the both distribution centers that we run. But I think what we started doing with that is layering with analytics and automation to make it more efficient. Because bringing in a transparency, bringing in that competitiveness within the facility was very, very important. How do you improve efficiency? We started with a 450 tasks a shift for a person. Today we sit at about 750 in 3 years' time. That's the kind of efficiency we've been able to grow, and that's more because of identifying who is the right picker, who is doing good, what are the right things that they're doing, and training the others who are the laggards, upskilling them to be able to do better. And it's not just in the picking process, but across the entire distribution center process. That's the kind of transformation which helped in terms of improving the efficiency. And also because you just can't keep adding manpower, you just can't keep adding people within the facility. The other pieces where the whole of automation and integration with multiple systems started bringing in was the whole e-commerce process. Now, when we went live with SAP EWMS, it did not have a very strong e-commerce warehousing process enabled on it. So the whole process of the returns management, the whole process of the invoicing and the packing and the invoicing process, that's where we brought in a lot of efficiency in terms of it did end up into a huge customization, and with that we started embedding a lot of imagery in terms of being able to improve the efficiency of the picker on the handle terminal, so that the product image is there so that he is able to pick faster, especially in the mixed queue bins, wherever we used to have mixed queue bins, and a large part of a DC was on mixed queue bins. Almost about 40% of the bins stock was at a single skew bin, 60% was at a mixed queue bin. So being able to improve that. So and then the other piece is about the execution of an e-commerce order was happening on WMS. For the invoicing, he was having to go to the ERP. How do you bring that into one single screen to be able to improve his efficiency? Because that was taking almost about 30 seconds for him to swap and being able to log on to 2 different systems. How do you enable all of that here? Embedding this with video to be able to capture the real-time video and bringing in a lot of analytics around that video itself to be able to say what went wrong into that particular packing, what was wrong in the product that has come as a return, being able to, so one use case from a returns management for the video was to showcase as an evidence in terms of what had come and what is it that we are talking about. The other was also to be able to identify, bring in more analytics in terms of saying, how can we leverage that data to start making more sense in terms of what kind of orders, what kind of products are coming in. And that's where again, the whole improvement in the supply chain or the processes, because these are all money that you lose. Close to about 3 to 4% of wrong products actually come back as a return in B2C, in fashion. That's huge money. You don't even have that kind of a margin in a B2C business. So if you are able to curtail that, if you are able to automate that whole process, the other piece that we started doing was being able to, if from a marketplace perspective, if there was a wrong product or a used product which was coming in, imagine we've got wrong products to the likes of, we had shipped out shoes and we've got flower pots in the shoes boxes. That's what you get as a return. So there's no guarantee what you're going to get back as a return. Being able to identify and then quickly raise a claim. The whole of the claim management process that was completely manual. That's again something that we used a lot of automation to be able to automate that process, going on to the partners' portals to be able to raise those claims and then submit the evidences of the wrong products. So there are quite a lot of bunch of things that we've been doing. Bringing in the whole of the TMS and remember, there's no one single good TMS which can solve your problem from a B2C and B2B both. So we've ended up integrating with 2 different TMSs, one for B2C and one B2B. Imagine it's from the same WMS, from the same DC. 2 different people could be running 2 different processes. Being able to enable that so that you are able to identify who is the logistic partner, who is the partner for whom you are shipping, what kind of flyer which flyer do you need to pack this particular order into, what are the packing instructions for that particular partner, and being able to embed that as part of the process to be able to bring in that efficiency. So I think there are a lot of use cases that we've been solving within the supply chain space to be able to not do the bigger pieces alone, but also to solve the smaller things which adds up to the overall efficiency of the distribution center. To be able to, and this has helped us to bring the whole scale. So we used to ship almost from dock to put away used to be about 48 hours for us. Today we sit at 24 hours, and we've done a pilot with RFID where we have seen we could bring it down to 6 hours. So from a 24-hour cycle. That's the scale at which, and all our products are anyway RFID tagged. So that's the scale at which we are trying to improve the efficiency. The whole of outbound accuracy that we are trying to improve is also humongous, because there again, we are talking of the complete flow through process which will improve, and we are building on that in terms of the flow through process, because we are saying we should be able to, from dock to outward is something that we should be able to do the same day within 12 hours.
So it looks like, thanks, it looks like a lot of automation which is influencing supply chain transformation. Let me share my experiences in some of the work which I had the privilege of working with some food brands, where we looked at the demand at the store level, and Vikram, coming to your point of demand sensing, we applied AI models of understanding demand at the store level. And each store has got its own demography, as I mentioned, and each characteristics, separate. And based on that, we were able to build an automated model of indenting or replenishment model from the stores based on the demand understood on a daily basis. And that helped them to not only reduce the wastage dramatically, but also improve the availability. And overall inventory load came down by almost 25-30% in the store. And because availability improved, the sale went up a little bit, around 4-5%. So I think these are some of the examples which can be useful in today's context in improving supply chain, not just at the back end but also at the front end. Thank you very much. And any questions?
Yeah. So my question is are any of your companies using synthetic data or maybe data lakes to improve supply chain? I know the use is not very predominant in India, so my knowledge again is very limited on the supply chain side. But I've been very curious whether people are using that or they're not, or at this point.
So again, that's a very good question. I didn't get your name, but hi, Arun. Data lake is I would say a recent entry to the data. If you heard Vinod in the past saying, people talk about big data. Now the recent term is data lake. I guess people are attempting to solve business problem using data lake. I would say few of us must have, including my organization, have started the journey on data lake. See, supply chain problem, if you ask my view on supply chain, all of us talk about speed. Like you heard what Ranjan said, I think we should talk about speed to market, because most of the digitization or automation, when we talk about, typical supply chain guys will talk about warehousing speed, transport speed. I guess the large money resides in the upstream processes. And there are people who are investing in products. PLM is a classic case. You must have seen Centrix standing outside. People are moving to digital lab dips. In fashion, sampling is the longest lead time process. And if you can cut down the sampling by 70-80% by going digital, I guess that will reduce your lead time by almost 15 to 20 days. And there are so many interventions which one can do in upstream processes, which will allow us to reduce the mind to market time or speed to market time. And I guess few of us, and definitely I know for a few people, are definitely invested in these interventions. And I guess, as I said in the past or earlier comments, that what has helped us is the surprise of COVID to enable us to flex our muscles to reduce the lead time to market. So my request, if all of you are from supply chain, don't look at supply chain as only last leg or end mile. Look at it from the original idea to the execution on ground.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Shailesh. Any other question? So yeah, we've come to the end. Thank you very much. It was interesting discussion. Yeah, and at least I learned few things. I don't know what others. I mean, I got few things. This back end thing I didn't know that, especially when you say reducing the supply chain time, the delivery period and the lead time is a wonderful contribution for today's discussion. Thank you very much.